Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Hillary. I hope you're doing well. Um, I am here to talk a little bit about the role of progesterone in perimenopause. And it's one of those things that if only women knew ahead of time and early, we could save ourselves a lot of distress and issues in going into menopause. So it's not actually when we are in menopause when we are the most symptomatic. It is actually the warm up to. So it's all the changes in hormones that start to create symptoms. And often these symptoms go unrecognized. Now, thank God we are in a time right now where the menopause word is no longer dirty and people are speaking about it and shouting from the rooftops, and Oprah's doing it and Gwyneth Paltrow's doing it and all these people are doing it. So that's awesome. And so I just want to explain some of the warning signs of when you have progesterone deficiency. And then in another series, we'll start to talk about treatments. But one of the first things that happens as we are transitioning into menopause. So perimenopause is sort of defined, just for definitions. Menopause is defined as a woman who has not had a menstrual period for 1 year, one full year. And that can take women a long time to get to. Perimenopause are the years in before, and it's about a 10-year span. So that means that you're going to start to notice hormone imbalances and changes and symptoms. Many of those symptoms show up as nervous system issues. So, anxiety, depression, sleep disorders, physical symptoms, shortened periods, sometimes heavy bleeding, um, and changes in the gut, changes in body type and the way that our body looks. So there's actual weight changes and shifts happening. We get more tummy fat. We get more kind of around our butt and thighs. So it's that sensation of like, whoa, I'm not who I used to be. Some women will present with headaches. Some women will present with fatigue. So the interesting thing is like it's extraordinarily unique how we go through this process. A lot of it has to do with one, our genetics, two, how we detox hormones, three, our total toxic burden, our stress burden, and whatever other health issues we have going on, right? So many of you know from watching this that I have polycystic ovarian syndrome. I had a lifelong progesterone deficiency because of my hormone setup with polycystic ovarian syndrome. And progesterone is one of those things that I needed to implement early into my perimenopausal life, especially since I was pre-set up with it. So many of you will go speak. If you're speaking to a doctor about hormones, mostly your first interface is your OB, which is definitely appropriate, though they have a little bit more of a limited understanding of some of them, not all of them, of course. They are surgeons, remember, so like they're the ones removing your fibroids if you have them, or helping you with your cervical polyps, or delivering your babies, or doing all kinds of brilliant things. So the hormone regulation part, some of them are great at, and some of them just are like not quite there yet, right? Many of the prescribing OBs think about progesterone just in its role for protecting the endometrium. So to kind of give, this might be a little trippy because it might be backwards, but let me see if I can do it right. So the first 5 days of the period, from day one, when you start to bleed, the hormone levels are quite low. And what happens is estradiol starts to rise as the cycle goes. Normally, if in a normal 28-day cycle, estradiol is peaking at around, for some women, day 12 to day 14. Those are the days where many of us feel our best. This is when we want to mate. This is when we feel like we could speak in public. We feel we have a ton of energy. We feel amazing because we have a really big amount of estrogen, which makes us our juiciest selves. That triggers an LH surge and kicks up ovulation. Okay. And when you ovulate, it is the egg around what's around it called the corpus luteum that releases progesterone. And progesterone is present in the luteal phase of the cycle. And if that egg is not fertilized, the progesterone will start to decline. Estrogen's coming down in the cycle. And eventually, it's that drop in progesterone that helps shed the lining. That is the trigger for shedding the lining and starting the cycle anew. Now, when the lights are dimming down on the ovaries, that's what I like to say, during our perimenopausal years, when the ovaries just aren't as blood-filled, badass, whatever, for all the reasons, they're aging out a little bit. And also, if you're under extreme stress, or if you've gone through a divorce or breakups or whatever, and extreme stress, your ovary is going to be very reactive to stress, and even more so in your 40s. So what happens is, as the lights dim on the ovary, that corpus luteum releasing the progesterone is just not doing as great of a job. It's just not doing as great of a job. It's just not around. It's just not as strong. It's not as potent. Sometimes we even one ovary stops ovulating. So like 1 month you'll have a normal cycle, and the next month you feel really dysregulated. And the interesting thing about hormones are, there's a few things that we get to work on. One is like the frank amount of the hormone that you're taking, but it's also that hormone relative to other hormones that deeply influence how we feel. So some people can still be quite have a lot of hormone, but if they're very estrogen dominant, progesterone deficient, they're going to be symptomatic. Some people are going to have a low amount of hormone, but they could still be estrogen dominant. And so part of the magic is trying to figure out, where are these major hormones for women relative to one another, as well as sort of like the frank amount. And during perimenopause, treating these more subtle deficiencies is what will make you have many less symptoms through your perimenopause. Like, my goal for our patient, if Kara and I are working with patients, or for my patients that I'm prescribing for, is they smooth their way into menopause. It's not extreme, because I'm trying to manage the extremes with their hormone balance, right? So progesterone, to finish the point, many of the prescribers think that progesterone is really just to protect the uterine lining. That's called the endometrium. So estrogen's job is to grow the uterine lining. So it makes this really thick lining. That's essentially your period if you don't get pregnant. And that thickness helps support an embryo to land and have a cozy home to replicate and make a baby. Okay. And so that starts to get thinner because we have less estrogen. But so progesterone's role in hormone replacement therapy for women with a uterus is to protect against endometrial growth. Because if we only gave estrogen, the endometrium would keep growing, and you could get a thick lining, and you could get cancerous cells in that thick lining. So that's why progesterone was put into hormone replacement therapy protocols. But progesterone in and of itself has a lot of magic. One, it's like a neurocalmative. So if you see a woman who's 3 months pregnant before she starts thinking about her birth, she's so flooded with progesterone. Usually that is a very relaxed woman. It's hard to get like pregnant women to have a big rise about things. They feel very calm. Their nervous system is calm. Progesterone is also a fabulous sleep support because it's calming the nervous system. Many, many women will experience sleep issues and changes during their perimenopausal years, which are very disturbing to people. It's the night waking from 2 to 4, or, waking up at 5 and not being able to go back to sleep, potentially having a hot flash in the night, potentially having night sweats. So many of these symptoms are also attributed to estrogen deficiency, but that can be due to this imbalance. So in perimenopause, using progesterone, even if we're using it in the luteal phase after ovulation, to just help nourish that role as the lights are dimming down on the ovaries and the corpus luteum's not giving as much progesterone. Progesterone can be a really beautiful harmonizing therapy for many, many, many women. Now, some people are very sensitive to it and it doesn't work great for them. And then I always think about, okay, then we need to understand, one, your genetic risks for how you detox your sex hormones, and two, like, what's happening with your liver function, what's happening with your cortisol and your adrenal glands. So it's always just these complicated layers. So if you give a lady progesterone and it makes her nauseous, now, some people are just very sensitive to progesterone. Like if you had hyperemesis during pregnancies and you're just vomiting, or progesterone makes you incredibly constipated. I mean, there are people who just don't tolerate oral progesterone well. And then there's other treatments. But like I said, it does come down to doing some amount of detoxification and clearing out the liver so that you can handle these things a little bit better. But progesterone, so the other thing I think about it a lot for are some of the mood issues that happen in perimenopause, some of the snappiness or bitchiness, or many of us will have our partners tell us that they know that the days before our periods were just not quite right. We're just not quite the same. We go through a big emotional process as our hormones are changing. I'm like, oh, it's going to make me tear up. So, progesterone can have a big impact on those mood changes late cycle. It can also have a big impact on if people are getting headaches or having bleeding issues, right? So like if the estrogen's still gunning it and the progesterone's a bit deficient, then you're going to have a lot more thickening in the endometrium, which can contribute to a lot of bleeding, shortened cycles, thick, heavy periods, more bleeding. Then women tend to get a little bit iron deficient, fatigue sets in, other issues start to come up. So like if you're in your 40s and you've had thicker, heavier periods than you ever have, they might be shorter, but you really want to make sure that you're not getting anemic. Because even low grade anemia will change the way your brain functions, change your mood. And late luteal phase progesterone could be a very good treatment for those things. Same as for women who are cycling, like they turned into having a 21-day cycle. It's often because maybe they're ovulating only on one side, or when they do ovulate, that corpus luteum's just not giving enough progesterone to hold the lining up before it starts to shed. So luteal phase progesterone can be a really great way to support those issues, bleeding, irregular bleeding patterns in perimenopause. So I'm going to do another episode on some of the natural ways that we can support progesterone, some of the herbs, some of the products that we use to be progesterone supportive, which is very helpful for women, even in their fertility journey, for sure in their fertility journey as we're trying to fix and correct hormone issues, but in perimenopause as well. Or for women who have a luteal phase defect, which means that they just have lower progesterone in their luteal phase. That can happen, in any woman's life. Many times that is related directly to stress on the body, increased surges of cortisol that steal progesterone a bit and make it so progesterone supporting stress hormones, instead of doing its job as creating and protecting the pregnancies that are coming, or, just helping the woman stay neurologically balanced and have a regulated cycle. So more to come with treatments, but hopefully that helps explain a little bit about progesterone and perimenopause, and some of the ways that we can use progesterone for good and for making us feel really great in our life. Mwah. See you soon.